Ice has the ability to preserve certain materials. Well, no wonder we keep our food in the freezer. However, some items found in the ice have been so well preserved that they surprise us and form real puzzles. Number 10. Treasures. Ice is a great concealer of treasures and expensive jewels. In 2012, an anonymous French climber was fortunate to find a treasure trove hidden deep in the ice. This discovery happened on Mount Blanc. He coincidentally found a small box containing 100 precious stones ranging from rubies, sapphires, and emerald. He handed the box over to native authorities, and the precious stones are valued at around $325,000. Scientists later discovered that the box was from a crashed Air India flight from January 1966. Because of the location of this crash, the aircraft was not recovered until several years later. This treasure discovered on Mount Blanc is one in hundreds of other treasures recovered below the Earth's surface. In 2020, the British Museum displayed similar treasures recovered from an archaeological site in Siberia. Amongst the items found were jewelry made from walrus ivory, sewing needles, and an ivory-modeled dog sled. The Yana rhinoceros horn in Siberia is rich in relics of ancient human history, and gradually these items are being exposed. As the permafrost melts, historical treasures dating thousands of years are recovered. Number 9. 25-million-year-old lake. In 2012, Russian scientists took on an unusual discovery route. Customarily, they expected to find something new, but I bet they didn't prepare for this shocker. After drilling over 2 miles below the landscape of Antarctica, they found Lake Bostic under the surface of the East Antarctic ice sheet. Ordinarily, this lake ought to exist in our favorite fictional books or movies, but far from that, scientists discovered this lake right under the ice. They were not staggered by this lake. There is more to than what meets the eye. Would you expect a lake buried in ice to be habitable? Certainly not. When researchers took samples of this lake to the laboratory, they realized that some living organisms dwelled in the lake. As expected, the species of bacteria found in this lake was unfamiliar. They were alien-like and perceived to have existed for thousands of years. Aside this lake, there are several others buried under Antarctica's ice sheet that are yet to be discovered. Antarctica is a bag full of surprises, and there is more that lies within for every surprise you unveil. Number 8. An entire World War battlefield. I did not witness the World War, and I bet you didn't witness it too. But how do we learn about the war and the worldwide devastation? Well, history books and documentaries are major sources of knowledge. The level of destruction we read in books is nothing compared to the actual effects of the World War. Now, what do I mean by that? Many casualties from the war were not recorded because some bodies were never even recovered. Thus, the death figures from the war were estimated. The Telegraph reports that there were more casualties from extreme cold than the war itself. Thousands of people died in the mountains in odd places, but their bodies were never discovered until global warming. Due to global warming, most of these mummified bodies were revealed, and the world was in awe. Around northern Italy's town of Peo, swords, spears, steel helmets, bows, and other relics from the war were recovered. Historians even discovered an entire cabin crew preserved below the ice. Their attire showed that they were soldiers deployed to fight in the war. Personal effects like photographs, newspapers, and pieces of art were also recovered from ice. As a result of this discovery, many lost bodies were returned to their families for burial. Number 7. An Iron Age tunic. The earliest form of freezers was used in 500 BC. Its major aim is preservation. This tunic existed since the Iron Age, but we only got to know about it recently because it was preserved by ice. In the past 20 years, the world has witnessed unprecedented environmental changes, and these changes have led to novel discoveries. But for global warming, this tunic would not have been discovered. In 2015, it was reported that some artifacts from the Iron Age were buried in ice. In the Opland country alone, over 2,000 artifacts were recovered from Norway's melting glaciers. The most glaring finding was a tunic dated between AD 230 and AD 390. This tunic was covered in horse droppings, and it portrayed the beauty of ancient textiles. It was carefully kept as though the owner knew he would talk about it in hundreds of years to come. If you're in the habit of disposing of precious items, you should cease from the practice. That item can make it to the museum hundreds of years to come. Number 6. 32,000-year-old seeds that resurrected. A group of Russian scientists traveling along the Koyma River found a stash of seeds frozen in ice. These seeds were suspected to be a squirrel's dinner, but seeing that the seeds were frozen in ice, the squirrel left in disappointment. Thousands of years later, researchers discovered these seeds 124 feet beneath the permafrost layer. Ironically, they still had viable plant tissues. When these seeds were planted, they germinated and bore fruits in due time. Unfortunately, the squirrel lost a sumptuous meal, but this finding turned out to be a plus on our side. Number 5. Plane trapped in ice. The list of unrecovered aircraft is an endless one. This military aircraft is one in many other planes that went missing. Some other planes have crashed in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and they may never be retrieved until the world ends. Well, scientists have found one such unfortunate plane that was presumed as internally lost. In 1952, a military aircraft heading to Anchorage, Alaska met its Waterloo when it crashed into a nearby glacier. This tragic incident took the lives of 41 passengers and 11 crew members. The wreckage from this crash was not retrieved because it was dangerous to do so at the time. 50 years later, the wreckage and the remains of the victims were recovered after the glacier melted. Number 4. Ötzi Iceman. Austrians and Italians are familiar with Ötzi Man's story. Famously known as Iceman, he is one of the most famous humans to be found in the snow. His remains date back to 5,300 years ago, yet his remains were found intact. This ancient man is regarded as an ancestor to the people around the Austrian area. Many myths surround the existence of this man. The most famous story is that he suffered from several diseases in his lifetime. He had Lyme disease, gallstones, hardened arteries, worn joints, and other unnamed illnesses. The remote cause of his death is unknown, but he appeared to have died from a violent blow to his skull. A few years after his remains were discovered, 7 of the men that found him died. It is said that he was not happy to be removed from his icy grave, which is why he took vengeance on the men that rescued him. Did you know that after 3,700 samples of blood were collated from the Iceman, 19 genetic relatives of Ötzi were discovered? Well, now you know. Number 3. World's deadliest virus. There are hundreds of viruses that have wreaked havoc globally, even as we speak. The coronavirus, for example, claimed thousands of lives in 2020 alone. In West Africa, countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo are still battling the dreaded Ebola virus. As is the case with most virus outbreaks, it results in a pandemic. Even with technological advancements, humans still struggle with curtailing the spread of viruses. What if I told you that there are many other dangerous viruses hidden in blocks of ice? Global warming continues to give us reasons to believe in the existence of hundreds of unknown viruses. A few years ago, a deadly virus was discovered under the tundra in Siberia. Scientists realized that this virus was alive and still active. Although it has existed for over 30,000 years, there is no cure for the virus. It was nicknamed Pathos and is said to be the deadliest virus on the Earth. The good news is that this virus does not affect humans, but amoebas. But what happens if a more deadly virus was to be discovered in a block of ice? Number 2. Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs existed over 200 million years ago and dominated through the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. It is not the first time you would hear about dinosaurs, as the fossils have been found in all 7 continents. There are many theories that prove the extinction of this creature, but we will not go into all the details now. Have you thought for a second how scientists got to know about the existence of this creature since humans did not meet them on Earth? Well, this creature became public knowledge after a series of investigations and findings that proved their existence. For example, in 2014, scientists found a collection of frozen dinosaur skeletons. It was easy to identify these skeletons because they were fresh and had soft tissues. This discovery was made in southern Chile in a sedimentary rock near the Tin Dog Glacier. On the whole, 46 specimens were found, and for the first time in many years, they were heated. When they were heated, the samples showed that they were species of ichthyosaur. These species lived during the Mesozoic age and were rapidly swimming marine reptiles. The recovered species were adult ichthyosaurs, and the biggest skeleton was a whopping 16 feet long. This, and thousands of other findings, proves the existence of this animal. Do you still doubt the existence of dinosaurs? Number 1. Message in a frozen bottle. If you were to travel back in time, what medium of communication would be perfect for information dissemination? I guess you would not have a variety to choose from, so you would settle for letter writing. For Paul T. Walker, sending a message through a tightly closed bottle seemed to be the best way to pass his message across. He was a geologist who wanted to prove the melting rate of glaciers. In 1959, he wrote a note, put it inside a bottle, and buried it under a rock near a glacier. The letter instructed whoever found it to measure the distance between the bottle and the edge of the iceberg. 54 years later, 2 researchers found the frozen bottle with a note inside. They read the note and acted on Walker's instructions. Both researchers discovered that the glacier retracted 200 feet from the position it was when Walker wrote the note. This finding is one of the thousands of other proofs that global warming is not a facade. Walker should be commended as a scientist with foresight. Although he is no more, his singular act of leaving a note to future researchers is commendable.